Welcome to the module on mental health in the digital age. In this part of the course, we're going to talk about the relationship between our devices and our mental well-being. And as post-secondary students navigating a world of constant connectivity, understanding and nurturing your mental health in this time that we live in is really paramount. And here's a quote from William Schrader. He is a CEO of Cynet, and Cynet was a firm that um, early on in the development of the internet did services like connectivity and hosting. He was kind of known as like the grandfather of its time. But anyways, back in 2018, he said, and I quote, "When we planned the commercial internet at Cynet back in 1980, we dreamt of all knowledge being at everyone's fingertips instantly, along with distance learning, distance medicine, including surgery, and happiness and peace. We blew it so far on happiness and peace." Now, I'm not completely sure we blew it, but I would say that the internet has created its fair share of challenges. When we think of things like hate speech and cyberbullying and cyber racism, we know that they have become real world problems in today's digital age and certainly can put mental health at risk. So, in addition to a person's self-esteem and self-image, both of which are linked to mental health, um, we can be negatively affected by things like social media comparisons and advertisements and messages about ideal body image. So, how can we maintain optimal levels of well-being across all of the platforms that we use and all of the devices that we own? Sometimes, I would argue all it takes is a little check-in with yourself and ask, how is this making me feel? Because interestingly, the things that bother us emotionally often have a physical effect on the body. So we might start to notice that when you check in with yourself, if you're doing something like doom scrolling, right, which is endlessly scrolling through your news feed, even though it might be depressing or disheartening. That's why I don't watch the news late at night, because it kind of puts me in a negative mood. You'll notice if you check in with yourself that if you're starting to feel like that, you will exhibit signs of it physically. And that is the flight or fight response, the chemical release in the body, such as not such as, but you'll start to see signs of things like increased heart rate. You'll see your breath quickening and muscle tension. So all of those types of things are a physical response to our emotional reactions. So that was long-winded. Finally, on to the next slide. So we're going to have a little sociology lesson here. So you have a smartphone, and it's not just for making calls, right? It has other purposes too. It connects you with people far away. It helps you find information. It gives you the weather. It entertains you, provides music. That is what we call the obvious purpose, or what we call the manifest function of technology. And sociologist Robert Merton, he used this idea to explain how things work in society. So he said that just like your smartphone, all things in society have very obvious functions, but they also have a lot of hidden functions. And sometimes what seems really obvious might not be the only reason that something exists. So there could be hidden reasons too. And that's what he called latent functions. So when it comes to your smartphone, there are unintended consequences of the smartphone. Not the reason why it was built, but unintended consequences. And when we go back to that original quote that I just read, The latent functions are the fact that it is not bringing happiness or peace. The unintended consequences of the smartphone are things like addiction or cyberbullying or data breaches, cyber racism. They're all hidden functions. And I talk about this because mental health is a negative, latent function of technology and of the way that we are using it right now. So this slide just gives exactly what I was just talking about, right? When it comes to technology, those manifest functions are the intended ones, the explicit outcomes of, for example, the smartphone. Why was it built? Well, it was built to communicate, right? So we could communicate, so we could connect, right? That was the purpose of social media platforms, right? Designed to facilitate communication and connection between individuals and groups. Those are the manifest functions. It is for information sharing, right? Social media serves as a platform for sharing news and information and updates, right? Those are all manifest functions of social media, for example. Latent functions, on the other hand, are the unintended or the hidden consequences, right? Not always apparent because sometimes it takes a little while for latent functions to rear their heads. But, for instance, when it comes to social media, well, social comparison and envy is one of them, right? That is a really good example of a manifest function, right? The purpose is to connect and share, but the latent function is the emergence of social comparisons. And users quite oftenly compare their lives to curated content of others, right? And that can lead to feelings of envy or inadequacy, and that affects our mental health. When it comes to validation and self-esteem, individuals who seek validation through likes and comments and shares of their post, well, that type of quest, right, for online validation can really negatively impact self-esteem, right? So it can also even lead to negative behavior to gain even more social or online approval. Right? So that's a latent function again. And we've talked about echo chambers before. And while social media aims to connect people, it can unintentionally lead to the formation of these echo chambers where users are only exposed to views similar to their own, and that can reinforce existing beliefs, and that can contribute to polarization. And lastly, a latent function of social media is FOMO, right? Fear of missing out, and the stress that's associated with that. It is a latent function of social media. That constant exposure to the exciting activities and experiences of others, it can lead us to feeling anxiety and stress if they feel like they're actually missing out on something. So I thought this was a great introduction to the mental health chapter because, unfortunately, as wonderful as technology is, as we know, it can come with some negative latent functions, and mental health and effects on our mental health are definitely one of them. And so we're going to get into that a little bit more in the next few videos.